There were three armies stationed on the northern frontier: the armies of the north, commanded by Marshal Rochambeau, the centre, commanded by the Marquis de Lafayette, and the Rhine, commanded by Marshal Luckner. King Louis commanded the north to invade Belgium from bases in Lille, Valenciennes, and Dunkirk. The 2,300-man column from Lille, led by Theobald Dillon, was intercepted and routed by Austrian hussars 10 miles into its march on the 28th. He was executed by his troops for treachery. The 15,000-man column from Valenciennes, led by the Duc de Biron, headed for Mons. His force faced off an Austrian force in Hainaut. In the evening of the 28th, rumours of Austrian attack led to 2 regiments of cavalry routing. Biron returned to Valenciennes after an 18-mile advance. The column from Dunkirk marched to Furnes on the 30th, found no resistance, and returned to base. The shameful failure of the first actions of the war caused Rochambeau to resign. Marshal Luckner replaced him for the time being. The second invasion of Belgium occurred in early June. On the 9th, Luckner led 20,000 men across the border. He took Menin and Kortrijk by the 19th. An Austrian counterattack under Johann Peter Beaulieu repulsed Luckner, who returned to Lille on the 30th. News of the Belgian defeats angered the public. Parisians blamed the king and made him wear a liberty cap to prove his loyalty to the revolution. Lafayette left the front to protest this. Lafayette moved his army closer to Paris by switching with Luckner and made his men swear loyalty to nation, law, and king. On the 2nd of August, after setting up a chain of regiments to Paris, Lafayette offered asylum to the king in his camp. The king declined. On the 11th of July, after news of the Duke of Brunswick's advance to Paris reached the city, the Legislative Assembly published the Patrie en Danger decree and summoned 100,000 fédérés, Republican volunteers to the National Guard, to Paris. The levy was vetoed by the king, but was enforced regardless. On the 1st of August, the Brunswick Manifesto reached Paris. It read, "If the least violence be offered to the Majesties, the King, Queen, and Royal Family, and if their safety and their liberty be not immediately assured, we will inflict an ever-memorable vengeance by delivering over the city of Paris to military execution and complete destruction." This failed to intimidate Paris, instead rallying most of the city behind the radicals in government. On the 10th of August, a crowd chanting La Marseillaise marched on the Tuileries Palace. At 8 a.m, fédérés faced off with 900 Swiss guards inside the palace. After 45 minutes, despite signs of peace from both sides, the tension broke into gunfire. The Swiss guards chased the fédérés out of the palace until reinforcements forced the Swiss to retreat back into the building. 600 Swiss guards were massacred after attempting to flee the palace. 60 of them paraded to the statue of Louis and put to death there. Most of the 300 survivors were arrested and later slaughtered in the September massacres. The king was placed in custody, and in September, a national convention was convened to draft a republican constitution. Brunswick's army of 86,000 men reached Koblenz on the 19th of August and invested Verdun on the 29th. Verdun surrendered on the 2nd of September. The armies of France kept manoeuvring to check Brunswick's slow approach to Paris. By the 20th of September, a foggy day, Brunswick's army had passed Valmy on the road to Châlons when it engaged French forces. It turned, facing away from Paris, to engage Lieutenant General François Kellermann's forces, which were largely composed of veterans from the Royal Army. Its left flank was situated on the road Brunswick had marched down, its centre on a hill south of Valmy, and its right flank on the highlands north of the town. Artillery fire was exchanged until 1 p.m, when Brunswick formed a line and advanced. Kellermann advanced his centre forces to meet it. He raised his hat on his sabre, touting its tricolour cockade and crying, "Vive la nation!" His troops replied, "Vive la France! Vive notre général!" and played Ça ira on fife and drum. French artillery inflicted such damage on Brunswick's advance that it withdrew. Artillery duelled once more until Prussian artillery exploded 3 French ammunition wagons, crippling Kellermann's battery. Brunswick sent another line forward to exploit the chaos, but a new French battery was moved up and repelled the German advance once more. The artillery duelled again until dark, when torrential rain prompted Brunswick's withdrawal from the battle. The total casualties were 300 to 500 Frenchmen and 180 Germans. Wolfgang von Goethe, who was attached to Brunswick's army, remarked, "Here and today begins a new epoch in the history of the world," regarding the defeat of the legendary Prussian regulars by ragtag French volunteers. In reality, veteran artillery officers won the day, but the battle was symbolic. Its legacy can still be seen today, such as in Charles de Gaulle's speeches. Valmy was the volunteers' first major engagement and first major victory. It was the first step in a long journey forging the regulars of Napoleon's later armies. On the 22nd of September, Brunswick was allowed to retreat to the front line unhindered. Lieutenant General Adam Philippe Custine de Sérèque used the newly created Army of the Vosges to stop Brunswick reinforcing Belgium. The Army of the Vosges advanced and captured Speyer on the 29th of September. Splitting at Heimbach, two columns attacked Speyer head-on, while one took the fortress of the town from the rear. The army then advanced through the Rhenish Palatinate with ease, taking Worms, Philipsburg, Mainz and Frankfurt with ease by the 31st of October, with only the latter resisting. Historians attribute this ease to disagreements between Prussia and Austria over the partition of Poland. Dumouriez, meanwhile, made another advance into Belgium towards Mons, with the new 70,000-man Army of Belgium, supported by the 20,000-man Army of the Ardennes in the Flanders campaign. This resulted in the Battle of Jemappes on the 6th of November against the Duke of Saxe-Teschen, who had 12,000 men. The German Duke entrenched his forces on the Couëme Ridge, stretching from the village of Jemappes to the village of Couëme. Initially, the French force, despite having 4 times as many infantrymen and twice as many cannons as the Germans, could not break through the line. However, the Duke of Chartres, later King Louis-Philippe, rallied his men and split the German line in half with a charging column. The Germans withdrew into the city of Mons. Once again, the veteran artillery had secured victory, but once again Paris hailed the nation in arms as the true victor. Brussels fell on the 14th of November, followed by Liège on the 30th. At this time, the Army of the North, led by Francisco de Miranda, was investing Antwerp. With Belgium all but conquered, Dumouriez had already turned his eyes to Holland despite his diminishing army. Only half of his forces remained, many volunteer contracts having expired. On the 2nd of December, Brunswick had retaken Frankfurt. On the 21st of December, much later than anticipated as a result of organisational upheaval, 36 vessels of the French Mediterranean fleet arrived off Cagliari in Sardinia. France saw the surrender of the island as important in weakening the Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont, which controlled Nice and Savoy, both targets of French expansion. The delays had allowed the Sardinians to assemble an army of 4,000 infantrymen and 6,000 horsemen to defend their island. A gale blew the French fleet westward. Counter-Admiral Laurent Truguet took the islands of San Pietro and Sant'Antioco without resistance. By the end of 1792, France had advanced on all fronts, occupying the vast majority of Belgium and crossing the Rhine at Mainz and Worms. It had also launched an ambitious but ultimately disastrous expedition against the island of Sardinia in December. This set the stage for the escalation of the conflict in 1793.